morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone, wherever you may be, and welcome to the fourth virtual meetup within the series around our Global Female Leaders Summit next year in May in Berlin. I am delighted to see such a terrific turnout for this event. Today we are really global, and I warmly welcome attendees literally around the globe. Hello from Germany to the world, to Luxembourg, France, Austria, Switzerland, Sweden, Italy, Great Britain, Spain, Netherlands, Croatia, Russia, Jordan, India, China, Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, USA. Hello to South America, Lima, and Fiji Islands. Thank you so much for your support. It's quite impressive. And it is so wonderful that we are progressing successfully on our way building our global community in order to exchange ideas and share experiences, knowing that we are among equals, a strong network. And I cordially invite you to our summit, to join our summit in Berlin, to take advantage of an agenda full of conversations, new perspectives, inspirations among remarkable change makers around the world, and also to renew good acquaintances and friendships, and of course, make new ones in the appropriate environment. We are hosting together our today's fireside conversation with the renowned International Institute for Management Development, IMD, based in Lausanne, Switzerland. It's my pleasure to introduce Vanina Farber. She is director and holder of the elea Chair for Social Innovation at IMD, Lausanne, as moderator today, and to welcome our guest, Kristin, CEO and founder of NIA Impact Capital based in Oakland, USA. Is NIA now with us? Or should I talk slowly? Vanina is an economist and political scientist specializing in social innovation, impact investing, and sustainable finance, with a vast experience in teaching, research, and consultancy. She is working with academic institutions, multinational corporations, and international organizations. And this is why she is the proven expert for moderating our topic today. The topic is Female Investors for Social Justice. Thank you so much, Vanina, for the good cooperation and your commitment to us and our global female leaders. And thank you very much, Kristin, for sharing your valuable experience. So, Vanina, the floor is yours.
So thank you so much, and I will tell you a little bit about the elea Center, but also some housekeeping rules for the conversation. But if somehow something happened to Kristin that'd be very strange, I've been working with female impact investors and on genderless investment for quite a long time, so I think we still can have a conversation about it, and I will tell you precisely why I invited Kristin. I think this will give us also some time for her to join if something happens. So, but first, I want to thank you for having this amazing audience and people from all over the world. And I want to set up a few house rules before we start and before I introduce everybody. So the idea is you're all going to be muted, especially at the beginning of this presentation. Again. And the idea, if you can, please keep your camera on, because it's always good to see your faces and the comments and the gesture when we're having a conversation. The conversation is recorded, so know that everything will be recorded. The idea is to have at the end 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A, and I will allow you at that time to open your mic and actually talk, and so we can see your faces. But if you want to participate in the middle of the conversation, if you have topics in between, you can write questions on the chat. And I will call on the questions that you have, and I will introduce some of the questions during the conversation. So the idea is to make it interactive and not really lecture type of event. And I think so. Remember, during the conversation, use the chat, use the text. And then at the end, we will do microphones. You can raise your hand or also write in the chat, but at the end, we will have a more open type of conversation. Now, obviously, don't forget to unmute yourself when we get that part, because usually that's what happens to all of us. So why this topic? No, and I will do a little bit of an introduction on this issue. is when we talk, and I lead a center, as you heard, the elea Center for Social Innovation. So when we talk about social innovation, it's really an abstract word to represent market solutions to social and environmental problems. So we really are trying to see how the market is addressing issues as complex as social justice or gender equity. You know, so how can we have solutions that are driven by the private sector? So on that side is what it interests me and the center. And can we mobilize private capital that intentionally wants to solve these problems to actually find solutions? And those solutions do not need to be goods and services, can be changes in processes, can be changes in the way we work, can be different kinds of things, but they're all very intentional. So when we talk about impact investors, one thing that defines these impact investors is precisely that they have an intentionality, you know, that they are very focused. And this is something that hopefully we will talk with Kristin, and if not, we can talk together. Usually when we talk about impact investors, we talk about investors that invest in small companies or social entrepreneurs, you know, or companies that were created around purpose. And many times we created kind of two worlds. One of these entrepreneurs that are very driven, and sometimes some of you may know the B corporations, the B Corp movement, or the benefit corporations, like companies like Patagonia or Natura, these companies that were created around a very purposeful companies. But many times when we look at the stock market, when we use a more traditional listed type of companies, we tend to call that area sustainable finance, or we tend to kind of separate it of this part of intentionality. I think like investors like Kristin and what we have seen in the market, I don't know if you've been following, if we've been following the news, it wasn't about gender, but not long ago, an activist investor, very small actually, pushed ExxonMobil to start being more transparent about their climate transition plans, you know? And actually it was supported by BlackRock, and ended up putting 3 board members at Exxon and actually pushing for change when Exxon didn't want to change. And what I found interesting, and what I contacted Kristin 2 years ago, actually, and when I met and we wrote a case together for students to learn how to do this active ownership, we call in a technical way, or to engage with companies to change, is because she actually presented what is called a shareholder resolution. She presented at a meeting, she's an investor at Tesla, and she presented a resolution that should be voted to change the forced arbitration policies at Tesla. No, so, and she got a lot of attention from the media, but I was interested and saying, okay, why, if you feel that something is wrong, you know, why do you engage with this company? Why don't you just invest somewhere else? Why don't you invest in the good companies that do good stuff, you know, rather than going, since you're a small investor, do you think that you can change Elon Musk? No, can you really affect change? And after that, we have a very, very interesting conversation. I actually work with another financial institution called Triodos Bank, and I wrote another case in that, and that one, they actually excluded Tesla, not because of gender issues, but because of governance issues. They felt the compensation of the CEO was not good, but it said, okay, we don't want to put our money there. So for me, it was very interesting. How can we express through finance our values, and how can we push for change, especially in topics that are very dear to us, you know? And can we use finance to push the agenda for gender equity? Many times when we look at gender issues, we think of women as beneficiaries. No, we work with women, we invest in women to improve their situation, but can we think also, I'm not saying that women do not need to be invested in to solve our problems too, but can we also be agents of that change and place our money intentionally to change the way different companies behave and to push the agenda further? So this is a little bit on the motivation piece. And please, if somebody from the coordination can tell me if somehow Kristin joins, and probably something really happened there. So I'm starting to get worried. But what I can do here while we see what happens is actually try to talk with you about the gender lens agenda and about what can we do or what are the kind of things that I have seen. And I could relate to Kristin, but I could talk about other investors that I've seen in the scenario. And if Kristin shows, I can talk about it. And something else that I like a lot and probably will be an interesting piece too is in a lot of the cases when I've seen female entrepreneurs or female investors, and also I would say in general, very purposeful investors do not need to be female, there is a part of what I call lifepreneurs. There is something sometimes many of us are very privileged of have been successful to make it and have be in leadership positions that we realize that we were in certain way privileged and that there are other people that may not have the same resources that we have, but we have some ideas of how to make it to leadership positions. So we can try to build that kind of ecosystem and that kind of solutions and make the bridge for those that are not privileged like us. And I think I like networks like the one we are here today precisely because of that. Because it is putting together different type of women to leverage on our assets, on our collective knowledge. And in the case of Kristin, but I can give you other examples. I don't know if you know Sally Kroczek, for example, of the company Elvest, and I can mention a couple of these things. In the case of Kristin, her father was an asset manager, a very traditional with very handsome returns, and she grew up in that family, learning about the trade pieces of the technical pieces of investing. And actually, if I tell you about her background or her story, she has a PhD in education from University of California, a master in research in bilingual education from Stanford, and a BA in teaching credential from Tufts University. And she was actually a professor before. So how did she end up founding a company called NIA Impact Capital, actually investing in listed companies and doing this shareholder or becoming an activist investor? And part of the story that I actually wanted to convey with her in the case, and I can tell you other stories, it was at a certain moment in her life, she had to make some changes and use different things, especially for personal reasons. But she decided that she actually wanted to use what she learned from the traditional investor, but do it in a different way. And she started doing community investing. She started doing impact investment. And this was, I think, around 2007 when she started being an impact investor and trying to work with family foundations and on how to move their endowments. And I think this process is still going on with a lot of family foundations. In the past, they have the family office on one side and the family philanthropy on the other. And now they're trying to bring both things together. So a lot of advisors saying, okay, you need to start investing your values. And she started as an advisor of these family offices until she decided to create in 2010 the NIA community. And I think the interesting piece here is, again, that is a full woman-led registered investment advisor with all women in the company, and with a purpose to change the face of finance. She trains women, she hires women, especially people of color, to bring the transformative power in investing. And I think I found this idea extremely interesting. At the same time, I can give you another example. Since we don't have only Kristin, I can give you another example. And her name is Sally Kroczek, and I might be mispronouncing her last name, but the company is called Elvest. I wrote it in the chat so you see. So Elvest, like she invests. And it was very interesting because during the global financial crisis, she actually was called, she was I think at that time, or the chief investment officer, CEO of Citi Bank at that time. And she was called the only honest woman in Wall Street. And When the global financial crisis hit, she actually pressured the board to return the money to those that were saving money at that time, even though the bank, obviously, banks were going bankrupt. No, and she ended up being fired for her position by the board, but at the same moment hired by another company and had even a more leadership role because she appeared like an ethical person. The interesting thing is that she had really good results at that time too, but she ended up being fired again, and very publicly. When there was a change of CEO, the board decided at that time that they had to replace her, and she realized that she did not build the relationship necessary to stay on the place. No, and she even comments some cases of some during the Me Too movement, of having in very uncomfortable, even I would say sexual harassment type of situations, where there were meetings very late at night and she had to meet clients, of how this good old club of finance, even though she made it, it was extremely uncomfortable. So she decided, after this very public firing, probably after some mourning, we all do some mourning when we have these kinds of issues, to look at herself and understand what assets she had, and said, if I made it, if with the education I have, with the position I have, I am worried and I have all this problem, there are a lot of other women that don't have the solutions or the assets that I have. And at that point, she realized that there was not only a gender gap in salaries or a wage gap, but that there was also a retirement gap, so that we women peak later. Most of us take some time or take some flexibility when we have jobs. So when we need to retire, we retire with much lower pension funds. And at the same time, sometimes we invest less and we pick our careers later on. So she realized that a lot of the pension funds or the products that were targeted or tailored for women were not aligned with our life cycle. They were thought as if we had a traditional linear life of a CEO or a man executive, that it peaks probably at 40, when our careers, I try to think that careers peak at 55 because I'm 52. So, but you can pick at 60 if you want, or you can choose your peaking. I think we don't need to choose like in our 30s or in our 20s. So she actually she created Elvest to work on products and to get women investing more on their pensions, but also on training, on adapting our life cycle. So when you go and try to look for an investment product, they will ask you, do you have kids? Do you want a college fund? Do you want to take a career break? When do you want? So a lot of things that happen in our lives that many times are not aligned with traditional models or traditional financial instruments. So thank you very much, Sigrid, for writing it correctly on the board, on the chat. So what I found also interesting on this case is she actually used her skills, because she was a finance person, and she knew how to build these kinds of products and solutions in a more traditional market, but now very intentionally targeted to women as consumers, as to selling the products, but also empowering women to learn more about how we should invest. And if you follow, I recommend you to follow her on LinkedIn or in other places, because you will see that she has a very interesting newsletter with information. In the case of Kristin, you're going to see the same. She had this financial background, but she had a very rooted communal type of to uprising or of growing up, and also this side of her that is a teacher, that is a professor. So she actually wants to go, and whenever she goes into these shareholder resolutions, she tries to create a movement around to get the votes to change the policies inside of the public company. So how can you align, or the question that really interested me and that I try to work is, how can you align who you are, what your values are, and at the same time put that at the service of social justice or the service of other women. So how can we create and if you're going to see in both cases, in the case of Kristin with Nia Capital, or in the case of Sally Kroczek with Elvest, you're going to see that it's not only about the product. It's not just about selling financial instruments for our retirement, or it's not only about managing the assets or the capital of investors in a way that aligns with our value. It is also about the education in the process. It's about bringing other women. It's about creating a movement. So for me, the interesting piece here, and maybe to discuss with you and to open to some questions, is what do we bring to the table, regardless on what function we are, that can mobilize our resources along with our money, because that I cannot avoid. Part of my background is I'm an economist. So somehow I have a tendency, I was educated that you express your, I don't know, that you like something when your willingness to purchase. You put money in the things that you value somehow. There are other things that you value, obviously, but you express in the way you distribute a budget or the way that you invest a little bit of your preferences. So I would like maybe to open, if you want now, for a couple of questions, and see if you are interested on these kinds of issues. And I can give you other examples, but how can we tie who we are, what our values are, and this idea of mobilizing resources to find solutions? And again, I can give you examples of additional research, but I would love also to hear a little bit from you, since we have many women and men. So I know I've seen a couple of men in our audience. If you have any examples from your own experience, or any doubts, or anything that you would like to comment.
Hi, it's Deborah Lorenzo. May I ask a question?
Thank you. Yes, please.
Yeah, so can you talk just a little bit about your perspective on how is ESG investing any different than value investing with ESG principles as your values? To me, it's, as you just mentioned, and thank you for your time today. I appreciate doing the one-man stand-up even when you didn't expect it. So well done.
Thank you.
To me, I sort of think of ESG as just the set of values that I care about. And so when I'm investing, I'm looking at things that matter to me, businesses I understand, not businesses that I don't, and then applying, these principles is how good, in air quotes, is this company? So I'd be interested in your perspective on that.
When we talk about ESG investing or ESG integration, and sometimes we even call it sustainable finance, it's really about different strategies of integrating environmental, social, and governance criteria into decision making. So investors have a risk return type of mindset analysis. Now the idea is, let's add impact. And in impact, we measure it or we quantify it with ESG, environmental issues, social issues, and governance issues, and you have different metrics for that. One part of the strategy, one type of sustainable finance investors actually are values-based investors, and can be really investing their values, or can be religious type of institutions that were kind of the pioneering ones in this field, or can be in some cases align with the mandates of the United Nations, or excluding tobacco, for example, so that you include. But this is not the only way. So when you do ESG integration, you have another set of strategies of companies that are just really looking at integrating this ESG because they think they reduce risk. So some people may think, okay, if I invest now in oil companies, we believe what is called like stranded assets, that oil might become money that you are not going to recover. So I want to cut my losses. So I want to reduce risk. I think that, so I try to do it not because of my values, it's just because I want to do risk reduction. Or I can have other companies that may think that some ESG issues can be a proxy for good performance, especially, for example, for governance. A company that has a good governance structure, or we've seen during the pandemic, companies that have good social, they work well with their employees, or they had good value chain relationships, actually perform better. So some investors may think, okay, and I can enhance returns by investing in these companies. Nothing related to values, really economic type of funds, like reducing risk or enhance performance. And they can use this ESG integration for that. And again, totally aligned with their fiduciary duty and totally aligned with it, not necessarily aligned with values. We are seeing more and more, so this idea of including intentionality, I would say, not only values, you know. So, okay, I want to invest in a specific thing or a topic that is very dear to me. And it can be, and I think I've seen Rito here somewhere, if I'm not wrong. For example, he cares about sanitation. No, and if I see some other people may care about water or climate crisis, or so have very tailored type of investing. And again, might not be values, but might be something that you care to you. And these are two sets of strategies. And there is even a third one. And this is the one that Mia and Kristin work on, that is called active ownership. And this is the piece with values are also happening. In the past, ESG was really, or when it started, it really the initial pieces, I would say, came from the apartheid in South Africa. You know, when there was a call for companies to divest from South Africa to have a change in the political system. So they said, we take our money out, we are going to push for change. So there was this idea that by divesting will strive governments or companies from money and they will have to change. So initially it was this exclusionary push, and it was also related to values, no, democratic values, religious values. Now there is a push more towards engagement rather than divesting. So I said, okay, we do some divestings, and it could be coal, for example, certain level of coal, tobacco, or certain armaments, etc. No, but more and more investors are saying, okay, if I divest, even if I'm BlackRock, you know, what I'm doing is leaving this company for investors that do not care. They still will get enough money. So I'm just dropping, you know, kicking the can to somebody else. So what they're saying is, if I want to speed up change, I need to engage with companies. So what I do if I'm an investor, and this is what Kristin does, is what I do is I go to Tesla. I love their product. So Kristin invests in companies that she likes. So she wouldn't invest in a company that she considers the product is not good. But in that case, she invests in Tesla. She thinks that Tesla is pioneering, that she has changed the automobile sector, that the car is amazing, batteries, and etc. She thinks it's a good investing, but has really bad labor policies. And actually the forced arbitration piece hides a lot of sexual discrimination and discrimination in general, and sexual harassment, you know? So, and all kinds of labor abuses. So she goes into these shareholder meetings and puts a shareholder resolution. So it's voted by all investors to force Tesla to change. She tried to talk to Tesla first so it would change. When it doesn't change, they do this what is called proxy voting to try to change companies. And more we are seeing more or less. Proxy voting season last year, or this year actually, was extremely active. And more you are seeing these investors to become more active. And she lost last year, but I think she had 26% vote in favor. This year, sadly, she lost again, but she had 48. With 51, that resolution would have passed and would have forced. But she actually won with IBM, and she won quite a few other cases where they have to start doing reports and changing their policies. You know? So the idea is, and I always ask, okay, you lost, should you divest? And they say, no, I will stay until I change them. I will build the coalition around this, because if I leave, Tesla will still survive. You know, they still have money. What I want is to build a movement around and to gain more and more people until we change the policy. So I think it's how do we execute that type of power of, have you asked your pension fund, because many of you probably have money on Tesla and you could vote in this shareholder resolution. No, I actually wrote a case. I don't know if Maria Elena is here, but Maria Elena Jaén is my co-author, and she realized that she had Tesla shares and she voted. No, and she didn't know this before writing the case. So how we become more aware of the way that we're spending and what companies are spending and our consumption issues and what we do. But again, I answer your question extremely long. So value investing is just one piece in a technical term. You have also a very economic point of view because we're starting to see that returns are less risk, but there's also a more activist point of view of changing companies. Sorry, yeah, I talk too much. I'm Latin, I'm Argentinian.
No, that was lovely. Thank you very much for that extended dialogue.
You. Yeah. Thank you, Iris, too, for any other questions or it doesn't need to be questions. You might want to share maybe your experience, or you might want to share a comment on this, on how do you see, and I find interesting because in the past, I think when we talk about gender equity issues or diversity and inclusion, we always thought that it was only an issue that happened inside of HR, and I think this we can extend it to ESG or sustainability in general. Before, it was at the hands of the chief sustainability officer or the CSR piece. We are seeing now that all these issues are moving to core functions of the company, to the financial officer, because you will have to engage with your investors if they're asking you, to operations, or to other parts of corporations. So it's not only about the chief learning officer or the HR where you have to deal with these issues, but they have to align that they need to understand how to talk to investors, and they need to understand how to talk to consumers. And so I think there is a discussion that sometimes an HR person, and I go to Sigrid in a minute, was used to talking about diversity and inclusion inside of the company, but did not know how to talk to an investor about the business case for this, or did not know how to talk, again, to a regulator about this, or to your accountant, or the accounting people that we have to do the reporting. How do we measure this? Some of these things we're doing. So how we measure the impact of the HR things that we're doing inside. And these are all fairly new conversations that require a very different set of skills. Sigrid, you have your hand up, and I don't know.
Yeah, I put my question already in the chat, but I can.
Sorry.
Yeah. So once again, so my question is: are there more female ESG investors than male? Is there data, statistics, and what are the criteria for ESG invests for being successful? I think this should be another thing than just in a certain percentage being successful.
I don't think that there are more female in raw numbers. I would say more female ESG investors than male investors, because there are more male investors than female. So the raw number, maybe if we do in proportion of the investors, it'll be interesting to see. And I have not seen that, but just totally anecdotal. We did a closed event with Bob Eccles and a professor from Oxford and Harvard, another on Columbia last week on climate change. And we invited people, and we had 2 men and 10 and 12 women somehow, and we didn't do it on purpose. So we had a lot of very feisty, super qualified, top level women on the field. And it wasn't just me inviting. I actually invited one of the 2 men, but it was. So I do think that a lot of us that want to marry our skills with our passion are finding this place to be a good place to be. And I think since there is a field that is reinventing itself, and it's also it's allowing more freedom, I think, to be creative, and a lot of us are finding that interesting. But again, I wouldn't say, especially now that there is momentum, you're going to see really still finance is a male-dominated environment, so you're still going to see more men. There are, on the other question that you ask, how can you do this well? There are quite a few. There is a lot of research right now about that, because the jury was out. Obviously, when I invite a lot of asset managers to webinars or to conferences, and they always, before they start a presentation, they put a disclaimer. Everything that I'm saying here is not advice, and we cannot guarantee returns. No, that you have always at the beginning of any person that comes from a bank. And if any of you are from the financial sector, you probably do exactly the same. The advantage with professor, especially when we do free advice, that's what is worth nothing, you know. So, but again, there is not a silver bullet on ESG, so it's not, nobody can guarantee that you will get returns with any type of investing. But there are now some hints and some pointers of how to do it properly and what can enhance returns. And one of the things, at least the research is quite conclusive now, and you will see all asset managers having this kind of filter on the ESG reporting, is that you focus on materiality. Do you know what materiality is? Raise your hand if you know what materiality is. If you know, if you say yes, or do a just, okay. Maria Elena knows, she's cheating because she wrote the case with me on materiality. That's funny. Yeah. So what is materiality? Really, and there are materiality is any accountant with us? Do we have an accountant? Don't tell me that I have like 30 something people and no accountant. That's the dream of an economist, but don't. Those are horrible jokes that I make. Okay, very inappropriate. Okay, so I'm coming back. So accountants, usually the idea of material issues is that if an issue is material, you have to disclose it. So material issues need to be disclosed in accounting because they're used for decision making. So, and when you are in a case, if a lawyer hides a material issue for absolving a person, that's a very bad thing. So issues that are relevant, that are material, need to be disclosed. The idea when you talk about ESG, and now there is some integration, but for example, there's a SASB definition, and somebody, maybe Marilena, you can help me put a link in the chat for SASB. What SASB says is that material issues are environmental, social, and governance issues that affect the financial performance of a company. Okay, so these are the material issues. GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, and I'm writing here, GRI, adds that are not only relevant or financially relevant for the company, but are also relevant to stakeholders. So you have the SASB definition, and then you have the GRI that is kind of called double materiality. If you come from Europe, you're going to see that a lot of the legislation and a lot of the reporting now is talking about this double materiality. And so the idea is these are the issues that really affect your financial performance and also that stakeholders matter. In this issue of, for example, I wrote another case. I feel I write a lot of cases because I feel when you teach these issues, a lot of the things that I find are very outdated. So I try to use pedagogy in the way that I work with companies. So I wrote a case about Philip Morris and asking, can a tobacco company be sustainable? And Philip Morris can say that, I don't know, that they treat women fairly or that they use little water. But if the cigarettes are killing us and having cancer and they don't talk about the safety of their product, obviously they're not dealing with a material issue. No, so when you can have, so each company, if you look at the SASB materiality map, depending which company you are, what sector you are, the material issues are different. If you are, I don't know, a manufacturing company in fashion, value chain matters, sourcing matters. If you are a financial company, maybe data privacy, data security, financial inclusion. So really, if you are like a car maker, it's a different story. So material issues are a key focus for investors these days. And what happened in the past is that when companies wanted to actually start in this sustainability road or transformation, they didn't know what to start. And they usually started with whatever was popular. So let's all do climate change, or let's all do, and they were all doing exactly the same thing without thinking or without having a proper reflection of what were their key impacts. And I think that's part of the learning, is that there's certain things that are house cleaning, that are licensed to operate, that you have to do, but there are other things that will drive your competitiveness. But a key starting point would be understanding your impacts and what is material to you. And again, it's not the same if you're an insurance company that if you're an oil company. No, so So that, and you're going to see a lot in the research and already embedded into the practitioner's piece, this idea of materiality. So again, another long answer, Sigrid. But I think that would be, and if any of you is interested on more research on how to do this, I'm very happy to send you information, because it is a little bit more complex than just focus on materiality. But I think if for an audience, that will be a place to start. Gunther, I see you moving a pen. I don't know if you're Gunther, and you're a man here, so it's not just about women. Thank
Hello.
you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, I'm Gunther Conrad. Once upon a time, I was executive in residence at IMD in Lausanne.
Oh, great.
I'm a strategist and futurist,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm happy to see all the women here on board. And I have with me here a book, which in my opinion is fundamental to your future role. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. It's from an American famous psychologist. She's called Wilson Schaef.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard?
No, I haven't. So.
The book is titled, in English, the original title is, "There Will Be 1,000 Years of Peace and Prosperity."
Mm-hmm.
And they will be ushered in by the women.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is your responsibility, just that you understand. And I'm here, my specialty is strategy development. Basically, I learned this, started with it at IMD 30 years ago. And I put it all into what I call gigatrends.
Mm-hmm.
I identified 20 gigatrends where we are going. And one of the gigatrends, number 14, is called from male dominance to women leadership.
Thank you so so thank you so much. And I think something else that I want to mention, especially on sustainable finance, is many times finance look at tendency of the past to forecast the future. And I think part of what we're trying to do is this idea of what Gunther is explaining is now we try to be forward looking. You know, we try to put our money to drive the change we want to see. So if we put more money, those companies will become more profitable and things, a positive loop will happen rather than look at the back. But I will push back on Gunther. I'm from Argentina, and I always make this joke that I think we will really have equality, know when we need to save the world, but when we are as mediocre as other men and we have the right to be as bad as everybody else. You know, so somehow that pressure on us of always being and I know this can be controversial, so I think I'm pretty sure most of us try to strive at what we do and try to be the best and try to solve problems. But I really think equality is when it's not on us to save any world, but that we really can reach positions the same as anybody else. No, so
end, yes, it will be high-performing team in the end.
Yeah, hopefully, and that will be valuable, and that will be valuable for men and women. Know that
totally.
That those that will be driving change,
yes,
would be, because sometimes we carry, and I find it myself. I don't know, even I carry, but maybe it's just my own guilt. But sometimes if I fail, I feel I'm failing all women if I do something wrong, or I'm failing all Latin Americans, or I'm failing. So you feel the weight in your shoulders of trying to do things, and that can make us more risk averse, and that can make us not to take chances. That can make us to do only the things that we already know. No? So I think we have the right of making mistakes, of not being perfect, and to start wars, to, know, most of us will strive anyway and do great, but I find it sometimes heavy to be the one driving change, even though again I'm trying every day.
Share
I don't know how
burden.
successfully. Exactly, share
the burden in the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Team. We're all together, and the change ahead of us has a dimension we have not seen for 20,000 years on the planet.
Yeah,
so
and sorry. I think that is something else that I'm doing some research on, on collaboration, and how there is something called blended finance. Again, I have a financial lens on a lot of things that I'm doing, and it is when philanthropic or public and private money are collaborating. So those that have, for example, philanthropic money, rather than just donating, can have a catalytic role. So they can put certain amount of money to risk a project, so it will become more attractive for private investors. So how can we, and this is again at a personal level, what interested me about Kristin or about Sally that we were mentioning before is how can you use who you are. If you're a philanthropist, you don't care about the return, you care about the impact. So you can take more risk or you can get lower return. But then how can you be catalytic to multiply and to speed change? So that I would say, and it is almost, it is 52 already. So how can you bring who you are to the table and speed and scale change and not do things on your own? Because I think part of when we work on our own, when we don't work as teams, where we don't work across sectors, or we don't work, and I think this is what I like, this women leadership network, because I think we can build that trust and that collaboration is the only way to speed up change. A lot of the problems we're facing these days are very systemic, and I think individual solutions will probably not do, and will have all of us burn out at the same time. So that's also my side. I have, as you know, IMD, Gunther, and I don't know if many of you know, IMD is a very special type of business school because we convene many different players. We are in Switzerland, we are small, but we are very in touch with the market. We were created by entrepreneurs. So I think I want, especially at the elea Center, to keep that convening space to push the boundaries. And this is why I do this research of how you bring innovative finance into topics like social justice or gender lens. And I'm very happy to continue the conversation with any of you later on. You can find me on LinkedIn, you can email me anyway. Any last question or comment from somebody else? I don't know. Happy to.
There's a question from Anneke Hagel
in the chat.
No?
Sorry, Anneke. Okay, how do you measure success of the investment? I mean, if you want to increase some value, for example. The interesting thing for ESG and for impact investing is that the bar is higher, because you measure success on financial returns, but also on impact. So it's not enough to make money, you need to have the impact, but it's not enough to have an impact, you also need to make money. So I think the measures of success, it takes very special and creative people to actually achieve both. And I think a lot of us with a privileged education should strive for this. We don't need to make money just by destroying the planet that we have surrounding us. We need to find creative way of doing things different. And I think the interesting piece and I also do some research on pay for success models, for example. Sometimes it's how do you measure those outcomes that you want to get. And I think that is, if you want to have a certain outcome or certain impact that will measure success, you need to be able to quantify it. Is it, and how do you go sometimes beyond number counting, beyond going just women on the board, or women in executive positions? So how can you go a little further on this idea of measuring impact? Can you spell it out? And there are very interesting models now. You're going to see a lot of companies, for example, doing sustainability linked lending or bonds. So if they achieve certain goal of reducing emissions or including women or access, then they get they pay lower interest rates. If they don't achieve that, they pay higher. So we are going to see a lot, or executives having compensation link to ESG. So can we really put in our incentives? Because again, the economist in me is telling me that we many times work and think about the bonus we're going to have at the end of the year. And if we only measure the financial side, that's what you're going to get. So can we put the financial side, but also include some ESG metrics? There is research on how complicated this is to be, and it's not that simple. But I think that's the idea. And there is also, if you look, there's a professor, or there's a working at Harvard on, for example, on accounting, impact weighted accounts. So how can companies start to account for this impact and not only count the financial side if they're creating a negative impact in the environment? What happens if you internalize all those negative externalities? Are you still making money or not? No? So can we start measuring what matters? Because if you don't measure, you don't manage things. So how do you measure impact, but how do you measure also financial returns? Yeah, a little bit. Again, if anybody is very interested in the specifics ways of measurement, I can also send you or point you out in the right direction. But this impact weighted accounts could be something you could check into. Yeah, Sigrid. Ooh, time has gone. Yeah. You're muted. Sorry.
Sorry. So didn't work. Okay, time was running with your profound speech. Thank you so much once again, Vanina. You saved us for this afternoon, and I think we didn't miss anything because of your profound expertise in social investing and impact investing. Thank you so much again, and thanks to the audience. Let's say for another time, hope to see you in next year in May, latest in Berlin, Vanina, and
hope so.
Some of the others. And also, don't forget, I didn't mention this for the next year's summit. We are very lucky that we have on our panel Maria Ressa, the Nobel Peace Prize laureate this year from Philippines.
Thank you, everybody.